Hi there, I'm Ben Pearce and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Every episode we talk through how to thrive in the tech world, not just survive. And if the podcast is not enough for you and you want weekly tips delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Elevated You newsletter. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to sign up. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. And what an episode we have got. Not one, but two guests. Can you believe it? So why? Well, we're talking about a huge problem in tech organisations. How do you create a productive and effective working environment where people aren't stressed, aren't burnt out, and actually enjoy their jobs? So, to help us with this topic, we have two people that have created a programme to help leaders become the type of manager that you've always wanted. So, please welcome to the show, Helen Joy and Nick Jemetta. Helen, Nick, it's lovely to have you with us.
Oh, hello.
Thanks for having us on.
It is brilliant to have you with us, and it's the first time we've tried two guests, three of us at the same time. So hopefully everything will work out brilliantly. But let's start with introductions. Helen, I'm going to come to you first. Could you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Absolutely, yeah. So my name is Helen Joy, and I run a management development business, and I've been doing that for myself for 11 years this year. And before that, I spent sort of 10, 15 years in the recruitment industry, looking after managers in a global recruitment business, from people who wanted to be managers, so that future talent, right through to regional director level, so the whole range. And now in my own business, I look after managers across all sorts of different sectors, business industries and sizes, and quite a few small tech businesses as well.
Brilliant. Really interesting. Well, thank you for joining us. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself? And of course, Nick, you're coming back. We did an episode, I forget what number, but months ago. So, Nick, can you reintroduce yourself to our listeners?
I can. So, hi, everyone. My name's Nick Jemetta. My business operates in a few different domains. So, I've worked in the tech industry for well over a decade. As a product manager and a head of product, I'm now a product coach and advisor. But alongside that, I also do a lot of work in the wellbeing space, in the mental health space, and that's through personal lived experience. And I've got a real passion for fusing the emergence of artificial and machine intelligence with human and emotional intelligence. And just as an anecdote, my career started in recruitment a long time ago, and that's where Helen and I met.
Really? Right.
Yes.
Okay. So going back a long time, and so time. Now we sort of come full circle. And so I guess the recent modern strength we're talking about is management development and development of leaders, along with what we talked about, Nick, was mental well-being and how we fuse all of that together to create a really productive, effective environment, like I was talking about, a team where people actually want to be. But let's start off by thinking about the problem a little bit. Because my feeling is that that's probably not where the tech industry is, that there's lots of people that are having challenges at the moment about the types of teams they're in. Do you want to kind of, Nick, could you sort of set the scene for us at the moment? What's the industry like with regards to the teams that people are working in?
So I think I've worked in tech a long time, and what I know from working in tech a long time is that there's a lot of hugely passionate people. There's a lot of money in tech, so it draws a certain type of individual, but there's also a massive amount of pressure. And the reality is that, UK businesses are spending on average about £10 million a year on wellbeing initiatives, but wellbeing at work, particularly in tech, has never really been worse. So we've got this huge investment, but I think we're probably investing in the wrong areas. So just got a couple of stats here. So in 2023, employment sickness absence was at the highest level reported for a decade. And unsurprisingly, mental ill health was one of the top two causes, driving not only short-term absences, but also long-term. So we know that there are going to be folks that need a day off because they're not well, but we're also talking about more perpetual work stress, burnout, all the sorts of outcomes that really don't do anything positive for the humans working in the teams or the teams themselves. When we talk about burnout, which you and I, Ben, have talked about before, in 2024, so really, really recently, more than 50% of employees felt burned out, and 1 in 5 working adults actually had to take time off work due to burnout. So we're in an environment where I think work is becoming less healthy for us, and there's emerging evidence that the more healthy the work environment, the more productive we are. And one of the things that I suppose most concerns Helen and I is that the role of a line manager on our well-being is massive. And this stat really stood out to me. So 70% of staff said that managers had the same impact on their well-being as their partners. I don't know how many partners feel listening to that.
Right, sorry, say that again.
Say that again, right. So 70% of staff polled, I think it was in 2024, said that managers had the same impact on their well-being as their partners at home.
It's horrific, isn't it, really? Right, okay. And I'm just trying to think how I thought maybe because you can get pretty stressed and a lot of demands, and you maybe spend more time speaking to your line manager than your partner.
Probably do. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? If you think about the amount of actual interaction and the amount of pressure that somebody puts on you in a working day, the majority of that pressure is going to come from your manager, and then you go out of the door and into the rest of your house these days, and then your partner's potentially seeing that impact of that pressure, and putting pressure on you in a different way because you're working long hours, and then they're putting pressure on you to reduce your hours, and
that's quite scary. Not only as when you think about who your boss is, but also thinking when I was a leader, that I had that kind of impact on people's lives, and did I maybe always give that the due respect it deserved? Maybe the odd throwaway comment or the odd, I don't know. You sort of think, wowzers.
And just one point, just to sort of build on that, Ben, is that what I don't want this to feel like is that we're trying to attack managers or belittle how hard the job is. The numbers and the stats that I'm sharing were really a call to action for Helen and I to recognise that managers are squeezed, and we all know, having been managers, you're squeezed from your team, you're squeezed from your own management, and I think you're squeezed from the pressure inside your own head. So we think managers are probably need some support, particularly in tech businesses. So that's what we're really passionate about, is making the lives of managers better, so in turn they make the lives of their teams better.
Yeah.
And I think particularly in tech, over the last over 2024 and coming into 2025, the amount of delayering that's been happening in the industry, managers are fewer and far between, which means each manager's got significantly more people that they're responsible for. And so those individuals aren't getting the support that they need. Those managers aren't getting the support that they need. And at the moment, there isn't a massive light at the end of the tunnel for that actually lifting and that changing. And that has such an impact on communication and the capacity to communicate to such vast numbers, the ability to have kind of oversight of what's going on, and how do you keep the morale up of people when you've got a team of 25, 30 people? You just can't do it easily.
Yeah, no, it is tough. And I remember it was, when I was doing it, I do remember, being squeezed by my business objectives, so I got being squeezed by the customers I was working with, they had their stuff, being squeezed by my boss above, then being squeezed by the people below, and when I say squeezed, the challenges they were having and were surfacing with me, or the terms of that, and then at the end of that, all the technology's changing, like every week the technology's changing, so you've got to relearn everything that you're doing, and like on the odd occasion, you might have some time to do something that you wanted. but it was...
Don't ask for too much, Ben.
Yeah, no, exactly. But and I've just chatting with people I know in the industry, definitely that middle management layer has been reduced quite a lot. I've seen a lot of redundancies around, particularly around that over the last few years, which everybody's span of control getting, and the business doesn't slow down, the customers' needs don't reduce, the pace of change of tech doesn't change. So the only variable there is how much time you spend and energy and effort with your direct reports, really. I'm guessing, it seems to me that's the only thing that is negotiable, in inverted commas.
And it's the ones that care that are getting most overwhelmed, because the person that they put last in everything and in their day to day is themselves, and because and their work takes a backseat, and their personal mental health takes a backseat, and they're trying so hard to do everything, and they're just, in a lot of organisations, they're kind of being abandoned a little bit.
Yeah. So how are organisations trying to solve this today, Helen? If I can ask you, so what's sort of happening at the moment? What are companies doing to try and solve this problem today?
Well, as Nick said, they are spending a lot of money on it.
Okay.
They are, which on one hand, which is brilliant, because there is investment. It's being talked about. It's being discussed. It's you think we couldn't have had these conversations 10 years ago. It just wouldn't have happened. So there is investment. The challenge is that investment is going in at the wrong point.
Okay.
It's going in at the intervention point rather than the prevention point. So there are employee assistance programs. So most organisations now will have a phone number that you can call when things get too much. There's mental health first aiders in most organisations then, so there are people that you can talk to. There might be access to wellness days, or they might have a one day every year where people can, come out, the team comes out the office for the day, and everything's made okay on that one day.
Yeah.
And some of that leads people to believe that maybe there isn't quite the right intention behind this. And I think people, I've known people that, and mental health first aid is fantastic. It's a great start point. But I've seen managers go on mental health first aid training and come back petrified, because they feel like they now have to solve everybody's problems, and that's actually not what it's there for. And that's the impression they're being given internally, is, okay, you've done that course, now you can solve all this. And it's, some of these employee assistance programs, they're confidential. And they're confidential with the air quotes, because there are some organisations that have actually had access to
I think I remember reading about that in the news. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awful.
It's horrifying, isn't it? Absolutely horrifying. Or, and then you've got we've got a foosball table. We have free fruit Fridays. We have a fridge full of Coke.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, by the way.
Yeah.
All
right. Okay. That's a different type of Coke.
It's just marketing we're talking about. But there are all the things that, they sit there and they go and they'll kind of go, oh, we do all these things. Of course we care about our people. But actually, the behaviours and the way that the organisation treats people on a day-to-day basis completely undermine all of those things. But there'll be people within the organisation who make these decisions and go, box ticked, done. Yes, we're a great organisation. So it's great that it's being talked about. It's great that it's on the agenda now. There's just still such a long way that we can go.
Okay, so rather than these sort of tick boxes, like we've done an event this year, you are now well. You're saying actually that there is, there's some things that we can do that are a bit more substantial. That aren't the free fruit. Free fruit's lovely, but that's like a cherry on the top. What we want is a great foundation. We want a great working environment. Okay. Well, I'm in. That's the sort of thing. That sounds wonderful. So, what does this? I guess what does this ideal team look like? So we talked about what it's not. It's not stressed. It's not well-being days once. It's something else. What is that thing? What does the ideal team look like, Nick?
So for me, it sits at multiple levels. At the very top of an organisation, it requires senior leaders, I think, to make harder choices.
Okay.
I've worked in tech businesses, I've worked in product teams, and one of the biggest drivers of stress and burnout is the sheer number of must-dos, the sheer number of priorities. So one of the first things that organisations can be doing strategically is to be getting much clearer on the things we're not going to do, which most importantly, therefore, distills down, these are the things we absolutely must do. Because when you have that focus, I think it's much easier for a line manager to actively manage and coach their team. So this is what we're talking about in terms of line managers having the support of their managers to really shape the strategy so that we're not trying to spread people too thin. Assuming that's in place, and it's never going to be a perfect world, then I think it's really about retraining and rewiring our perception of what a great manager looks like. If we rewind 20 years to when Helen and I were working together in recruitment, a lot of the managers at that time, they were micromanagers, they were command and control.
Yeah.
They couldn't possibly reveal any vulnerability. They weren't interested in role modeling. It was you turn up to work, you get paid, and you do what I tell you. Now that's changing, but I think we still have a significant number of managers that believe that is how they need to manage. And 82% of managers are accidental. What does that mean from a tech point of view? It means that a lot of the managers being promoted are great within their particular discipline, whether that's in engineering or product or design or data, but they've never had any support in how to manage. And managing people is not about having great technical skills. Managing people is actually having great human skills and emotional intelligence. So it's really about building the capacity for a manager to be very self-aware, so that, to Helen's earlier point, they're looking after themselves, and then a manager to have the skills to get the best from their people to drive the right business outcomes. So it doesn't mean managers should be therapists, but it probably does mean that a manager can have a conversation and be empathetic with their team if they're struggling, knowing that not only is it the right thing to do for the person, but if they handle it right, that person will become productive. And when you have many productive, healthy, motivated people, to your earlier question about what does a great team look like, to me, they are the core ingredients of a great team.
Okay. So if I sort of play back what I think I've heard you're saying this great team is like, it's got some clear direction, some clarity on what we're doing and also what we're not doing, because the world's super busy and we need some clarity on that. You've then got a self-aware leader that's well trained, that is able to empathise and understand the team that they're working with and help them prioritise and coach them to be really effective and bring that team together. And if we get those sorts of things right, then that makes the team more productive, more effective and more successful as a team. Have I played that back? Am I understanding that right?
I mean, it's almost like your ChatGPT on the other end, Ben. You've synthesised that and distilled it wonderfully.
Yeah. So
are you sure it is Ben?
Yeah, it is. It is. I've just got a prompt here that just says, play this back like to a 5-year-old, because that is how my brain works. So that's normally how I speak, like a 5-year-old. Right. Okay. So I think I understand that, and so I guess that's like the holy grail, right? Everybody wants to be in a team like that, but for a million reasons, that's not what people's teams are like. So how do we go from where we are today to how do managers go from where they are today to being somebody that can lead a team like that? Have you got any tips?
How long have we got?
Go for hours on this. I think the first thing is always about being honest, and it's being honest with your line manager if you can be. Because not everyone can be. Because as you just said, not all of us. It's great if you're in an environment when you've got that fantastic line manager that you can talk to and be honest with. But you may not be. But there may be someone within your organisation that you can be honest with. Where if you are getting to the point where, or well before you're getting to the point of it's kind of overwhelming. But when things start to get difficult, find someone that you trust. Find someone that you can talk to. One of the things that over the years of all the development I've done with managers across all sorts of industries and sectors, the similarity in the challenges and the problems that managers are having, and when they have that conversation with someone who goes, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, it's really bloody difficult, isn't it? And just that can make everything seem so much lighter. Just take some of that pressure off your shoulders and go, actually, it's not just me, it's okay.
Yeah, it is. And I think, when I talk to, whether you're first line managers, or in new management roles, or managers that have been CEOs. I was chatting to a CEO a while ago who was saying he's just got a real challenge with one of his direct reports at the moment, actually, and was up didn't get to sleep till 5 o'clock in the morning because they're thinking about it. And this sort of stuff where it's about people is really quite emotionally draining. So just to be able to be honest to people and say, God, this is what it's like. I'm not some robot. That's really important.
And if you can be honest with the person that you report into, the level of pressure that takes off, when the majority of people will take some of that burden for you and help you and support you, and can then support you so that things don't get any worse, so that they can start to put things into place to help improve things. But fear gets in the way sometimes, and we worry that if we admit to vulnerability, if we admit that we're not perfect in this manager job, again, especially when we might be new into the role, that stops us being honest because of that fear. But actually, again, is it 85% of things that we worry about never come to pass?
Right, yeah.
Chances are you have that conversation, actually the outcome will be what you want or what you'd hope for, rather than the other.
And so in your experience, most managers are receptive. If a direct report comes to them and is saying, look, these are some challenges, are most receptive, because we fear that they're going to be like Vlad the Impaler when we talk to them about it. What's the kind of ratio of managers that are fine versus Vlad the Impalers?
They're mostly fine, and I think you know whether your manager's going to skewer you to the wall the minute you admit any defeat, and that's where you maybe find another person to be honest with in the organisation,
or another job, another company.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because actually, if you turn to your manager and say this is overwhelming, this is getting too much, and I can't cope, and their response is, well, tough luck, you do have a choice.
Yeah.
You can choose to stay there and try and make the best of things and try and get some support, or you can start to look at alternatives and what your options are. But most managers generally, because actually they would much rather know that there was a problem when it was solvable than when that problem became you being completely burnt out and off for 3 months because you just can't function anymore. Most human beings would want to.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was thinking about, I guess, sort of almost like the commoditization of culture in tech. So what I mean by that is, most tech companies, the cultures are pretty much the same, because it's the same people are moving around from company to company. They're going from Microsoft to Amazon to Facebook, off to Google, down to a partner, off to so-and-so. And actually, it's that your line manager and maybe your skip manager, that's almost where the culture comes from, because pretty much all the tech companies are the same. So yeah, that if the line manager's not the one, just being able to skip to the next one, I think can really be a powerful
because
thing.
Two people can work in the same organisation and have a completely different experience of that organisation. One can have a wonderful experience because they've got a fantastic manager. You can then go to a different function and somebody else hates it because they've got a different manager. And because that manager at each level controls the culture and the way that team works.
Yeah. Okay. So first tip then is basically be honest, and create an environment where you can be honest when you're managing up. Next tip?
We're going to continue to build on the be honest theme, and I've actually got 2 tips here, because one's just come to me as we were talking, which is to be honest, to have an honest conversation upwards. There's a step before that, which is being honest with yourself.
Okay.
So if you're struggling, there is a stage you have to go through of actually being aware of it and accepting it and willing to act on it. Because the other alternative is you don't accept it, you don't recognize it, and you drown, and then eventually you're burning out yourself. So this is why this self-awareness as part of what we're doing with the human leader is so important. I think also the honesty with yourself part is also important if you don't have a good relationship with your line manager. Because if you honestly know that you need to have a difficult conversation, you don't think you can have it with that person, what does that mean? Well, it means either you have to find a way to have it, which might mean role playing it. It might mean getting some coaching to prepare you for it. It might mean, to your point, Ben, skipping a level. Or if you're going to go outside of your immediate organisation, what other options do you have? Well, when I've had difficult experiences, I've actually spoken to ex-managers who I've still got a really good relationship with.
Yeah.
That's one option. But if you're a new manager, or if you're somebody that maybe isn't as active as building your network, let's say, it can feel quite a lonely, isolating experience. And one of the things that sort of surprised us when we were really thinking about the human leader was that more than 50% of managers admit to feeling isolated. I mean, you're already being squeezed from every direction. To layer in loneliness and isolation is just a perfect storm. So that's why, as part of the human leader, we've created this online community, so that, to the points you're making, middle managers can engage, interact, learn, network with other middle managers, but not just in their organisation. That's the key bit, because if there's some cultural norm that you're not comfortable with, or some sensitivity you're not comfortable with, all of a sudden we want to create a world that allows middle managers to connect, yes, within tech, but our longer term ambition is, wouldn't it be great if a middle manager in tech could learn something from a middle manager working in bioscience?
Yeah.
Or a middle manager in bioscience learning from someone who's working in F1, for example.
Yeah.
So
it's about that honesty then. So that being honest with yourself, that this is something you need to think about, and then honest up, we've kind of talked about. And then did you say there was going to be a second tip? Because you had two there.
There was. We're drawing some sort of triangle here with the manager in the middle. So it's also about being able to be honest, I suppose, at your level with your peers, but also being honest with your team. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges for middle managers as it stands, but one of the biggest opportunities for anyone who's willing to consider the path towards being a human leader. Because I still think in our society, and particularly for men, I still think this is a massive problem. We know that tech over indexes on men. Any kind of vulnerability, we have this perception that you're going to be seen as weak. We have this perception that you admit some kind of vulnerability and that's your career to smoke. And I actually think in the right cultures and with a level of bravery, when you use vulnerability properly, it can build trust and it can build psychological safety. And we know that those two components are absolutely fundamental to high-performing teams. So, when I first opened up about the struggles with my own well-being, and that was 7 years ago I did that now, I was a line manager at the time. And a little part of me did wonder whether or not I was throwing my career away. But once I spoke up, once I opened up, the quality of the conversations with my direct reports almost overnight transformed. Why? Because they didn't just see me as a robot that was trying to dictate. They saw me as a human being that was having his own struggles but was working through them, so they could take some inspiration from that. But also, they started to open up to me, and the dialogue became much richer. And I'm fortunate that because I'd done all the right training, I knew to draw the circle around myself. So I knew I didn't have to try and fix the situation, but I could listen, I could empathise, I could signpost. And over time, I built much more robust relationships with those individuals, not just as direct reports, but as human beings.
Yeah. So how do you... So when I think about this idea of being vulnerable, and I'm 100% on board, when you are happy to admit your foibles and your weaknesses and the challenges you have, then other people are, and then the conversation becomes so much better. But what about the leadership side? Because we're talking about human leadership. And so let me give you an example. COVID, right, a few years ago. Just imagine, and I'm going to make no political comment on any of the leaders from anybody around the world during this time. But just imagine that you've got a leader that gets up there and goes, do you know what? I'm really scared by this. I don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're doing. But I hear what you're saying, but I'm a bit scared and I don't really know what we're doing. Versus somebody that goes, this is what we're going to do. We are going to wear masks. We're going to do this with the cut. We're going to isolate. We're going to do this. Somebody that gives direction and clarity. Isn't there a balance to be had between this vulnerability and this leadership? And how do you balance that together in a leadership role?
I'll let Helen jump in on that one first.
Well past the mark.
She was doing a lot of nodding, so I thought, she's got something to say.
And it's absolutely right, because there's different places for different styles of leadership, and it is very much dependent on the situation that you're in. And there will be times when people need direction, and there will be times when people need to see the leader at the front, heading in the direction, painting that picture of where you're going, and getting everyone on board. It's not about being that vulnerable all the time, but it's about being able to recognise when is the right time to show that vulnerability. So, we are living in a world and an environment, and you said earlier, the pace of technological change at the moment is ridiculous, and that makes those human frailties, vulnerabilities, and what have you so much more important, and the human side of us so much more important, because we're competing constantly with technology, and it's about having the skill and the self-awareness to recognise which me does this person need in this moment, because it's about the person that you're with, it's about the situation that you're in, and what do this team need me to be to get them to this point, and then we can revisit and we can look at, okay, maybe I'll get you through this major traumatic situation, and at the end of it I might turn around and go, yeah, I know, bit scary that, wasn't it? Because it's that bit, and then they turn around and go, oh my god, you were as scared as we were, but you stepped up and you did that. Actually, I could possibly do that next time. And it's about empowering people, but it's about recognising and having that self-awareness to go, this is the me you need right now, whilst being aware of the impact of that on you and not trying to be that person for too long.
It's almost like mode. Oh, sorry, Ben, go on.
No, you carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think my natural inclination, this is probably why Helen and I work so well together, is I'm always going to be slightly more in the we must be more vulnerable camp, because I don't see any of us doing it. But, absolutely, I'm pragmatic. It's that kind of the mode you're in, but also there's shades of vulnerability. Because for me, the easiest way to be vulnerable but still be clear, be impactful, be inspirational, is to just narrate within a team environment that in our culture we're happy to fail.
Yeah.
That for me is an entry point to vulnerability, while still displaying very strong leadership.
Yeah, happy to fail fast, course correct.
Happy to learn.
Happy to learn, so that hopefully we don't have the massive I'm sacked failures. Because we've done that course correcting, which means that we are able to be successful to drive those business outcomes. Yeah. So the tips we've had so far is about being honest up. We've had about being honest with ourselves, being honest and vulnerable down with our direct reports. Any other tips that you'd share at all?
I think this one feeds on from the conversation we've just had, actually, which is saying, I don't know.
Okay.
So when, as a team leader, team manager, department leader, if somebody, because it works on so many levels, in terms of just taking the pressure off yourself to feel like you've got to know everything all the time. It actually is really, really empowering for your team. The first time I said I don't know to my team, to a member of my team, as Nick said earlier on, I suddenly had that moment of that vulnerability of, oh God, I'm going to admit this, and they're going to lose all respect for me, and it's going to be awful. And they just looked at me and went, oh, right, okay. I'll tell you what, I'll go and ask them over there. And off they went. And suddenly I was like, oh, I don't have to solve this problem for you. You're actually going to go and find out and solve it for yourself. So that person came back. So not only did I take in the pressure, rather than going, oh, well, I think it's this, and giving them the wrong answer and looking like a complete idiot, or taking the pressure to go and find the answer for myself, what that did was give them the opportunity to go away, learn, grow, develop, build their confidence, whilst not adding extra pressure to me as a manager. Yeah. And it was revelatory. It is and I mean, you don't say it all the time. There would be that question like, why are you actually doing this job again? Because you should know some of the answers. But it's that bit. I think, again, 10 years ago, anyone in a management role would have just blagged their way through the answer. And then hence you get to these positions where it's like, well, don't ask him anything because he doesn't know what he's talking about. But that sense of it's okay to not know everything. Nobody's expecting you to know everything. And actually by admitting that, you're showing you're human, you're showing you that it's okay to not know, but you're also enabling and supporting people to go out and find answers for themselves and to grow and to develop and take them forward. And that as a manager is what you're all about. You should be there. Yeah. Your job is to create the environment where your people can be at their very, very best and do their best, and to help them develop to the absolute utmost of their capacity. That should be what you're there to do.
Yeah. And just that very simple thing of saying, I don't know. And do you know what? Maybe even just using that as a way to get them to go and do that, as a way to self-develop, even if you do know the answer. I remember doing some coaching with a guy called Michael Bungay-Stain that was really good. He used to call it the advice monster. How managers will often just, like, well, I know the answer. Blah, there you go. As opposed to saying, well, I don't know. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But actually go and do something yourself. Go and do some research, find stuff out, because you'll be more energised, motivated, and probably come back with a better result through coaching rather than that command and conquer approach.
Getting over your own ego, that's what it is sometimes.
Yeah. Fascinating. Do you know what? I've just glanced at the clock and we are quickly heading towards the end of the episode. So I guess as we start to summarise, so you guys have put together a programme called The Human Leader, I believe. So what sort of things do you do in this programme to help people sort of solve these challenges that we've been talking about?
Shall I do that, Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to go to you, Helen. Yes, to you.
Okay. So basically what we've done with the Human Leader programme is it is management development and mental health awareness, well-being, embedded into each other. So what we do, rather than them being two separate things, what we've done is put a programme together that actually starts with managers looking internally, looking at themselves, recognising in themselves their boundaries, what their strengths are, how they use those, and then working through, once they've got that kind of, we talked earlier on about self-awareness, and looking at themselves as a human, and then looking out at their team and focusing on building the skills that mean they build a mentally healthy and well-developed and well-skilled team. So they're armed with all of that, and it's all blended into each other. It's not, here's a management development program, here's some mental health training. It's seamlessly blended into the two. And then the final, and there's three sort of levels to it, and the final level is very much around, okay, let's take all of this and let's help you take your business to the next level, because you've now created that team that's performing, because not only are you in a real power position of strength, but also your team are, which means that gives you all the commercial leverage to build and grow your business.
Really interesting. Thank you for that, Helen. Nick, I'm going to come to you then as we start to wrap up the episode. Key takeaways. We've been through a lot. What would be the key takeaways that you'd share?
Wellbeing at work isn't working right now. I think that is very clear, that particularly in the tech industry, I think we need to be thinking a bit more disruptively. That's the definition of what we're trying to do in tech. I think we need to apply that mindset to our people and to our leaders. Helen's already talked about the program with the Human Leader, and if I just try and extract some of the topics within that program that I think are key takeaways, I think any line managers listening, if you want to try and start to lean into what we believe it means to be a human leader, instead of thinking about goal setting, instead of thinking about setting tasks and being directive, think more about, how can I build my own mental fitness? How can I build the mental fitness of my team? How can I actually create psychological safety? Do my team trust me, and do I trust my team? There's a slight shift perhaps, and a nuance on how we've traditionally thought about what it means to be a great manager. What I believe, having worked in tech for a long time, is that managers should be able to take a more experimental mindset And some of the tips that we talked about earlier, I imagine for some of your listeners might feel quite arresting and quite challenging. Experiment with it. It might not work for you immediately. It might not work in every conversation, but experiment with it, see how you get on, pivot, try something else. The final line, I suppose, in my summary, which for me kind of sums up where we are, is that I'm passionate about us moving past just ticking boxes to actually building better, longer lasting behaviours.
Yeah, really, really interesting, Nick. Thank you for that. I think, and for me, from my key takeaways, from the conversation we've had, I really like that idea. Well, let's just think about being honest with ourselves, honest up, honest down. And then just that balance of vulnerability of going, actually, if I'm happy to be vulnerable, then people might reciprocate. Therefore, the level of conversation we're going to have is going to completely change to a far deeper level, which means that we're more engaged with each other, we're more human, we're more connected, and that breeds a stronger foundation from which success comes. And I've observed that. I've definitely observed that. So I think that's fascinating. So thank you for leading us on that conversation. Now, just before we finally wrap up, if people want to get hold of you, where can people, if they've really enjoyed this conversation, where can people find out more about you?
So you can learn more about the program, or you can sign up to the community waitlist, and the community is opening in 2025. And you can visit us at thehumanleader.co.uk, and Helen and I are also both very active on LinkedIn.
Okay, and I'll pop those in the show notes so that people can see those links. So thehumanleader.co.uk and on LinkedIn. Well, the final thing for me to say is thank you so much. It has been a really inspiring, really insightful, great conversation. So thank you very much, Nick, and thank you very much, Helen.
Thanks for having us, Ben.
Thanks for having us.
Well, there we go. Thanks for listening. Remember, if the podcast is not enough for you and you want weekly tips delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Elevated You newsletter. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to sign up. Oh, and can you do me a favour? Could you subscribe to the podcast and rate the show? It really helps spread the word.